like to say good morning to everyone. Truly, it is an honor and a privilege to be back in the house of the Lord yet again. We are excited that God has given us another day that we've never seen before, we never will see again. And so, what we're going to do is we want to give God all the honor and the glory and the praise that He deserves, because we don't know how much time that we have left here on this earth. So, let us notice hymn number 229. Victory in Jesus, hymn 229. We'll sing the first and second stanza, after which we'll have Brother Wallace lead us in the word of prayer, and then we'll sing the third stanza. Let us sing. I heard an old story, how a Savior came from glory, how He gave His life on Calvary to save a wretch like me. I heard about His groaning, of His precious blood atoning. Then I repented of my sins and won the victory. Oh, victory in Jesus, my Savior forever. He sought me and He bought me with His redeeming blood. He loved me ere I knew Him, and all my love is due Him. He plunged me to victory beneath the cleansing flood. Well, I heard about His healing, of His cleansing power revealing, how He made the lame to walk again and caused the blind to see. And then I cried, dear Jesus, come and heal my broken spirit. I then obeyed the blessed commands and gained the victory. Oh, victory in Jesus, my Savior forever. He sought me and He bought me with His redeeming blood. Well, He loved me ere I knew Him, and all my love is due Him. He plunged me to victory beneath the cleansing flood.
Good morning, Bessemer. Let us go to the Lord in prayer. Most kind and gracious Heavenly Father, we thank you for allowing us to come get another portion of your word this morning. Father, we ask that you uplift the teacher as he comes forth to break forth the bread of life. And Father, help us to open our minds and our hearts so that we can absorb the word that will be given to us, Lord, and the courage to apply it to our daily lives. Lord, please forgive us for the sins we've committed. And that's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Those the last stanza. I heard about a mansion He has built for me in glory. And I heard about the streets of gold beyond the crystal sea, about the angels singing and the old redemption story. And some sweet day I'll sing up there the song of victory. Oh, victory in Jesus, my Savior forever. He sought me and He bought me with His redeeming blood. He loved me ere I knew Him, and all my love is due Him. He plunged me to victory beneath the cleansing flood.
Good morning, good morning. We trust you are here with your Bibles this morning as we begin to study another section of our lessons that are found in the book of Judges. We are still in our 17th chapter or lesson as per our study book. If you have that with you, that's where we want to be at. We're going to find ourselves this morning on the 77th page of that lesson, or of the book rather, second page of the lesson. Now, in our textbook, the lesson covers 17th lesson covers chapter 19, 20, and 21, and up and through this past Wednesday, we were covering and finished up with chapter 19, and so that takes us into chapter 20 this morning. All still in the lesson number 17. It takes us from page 76 to 77. The book kind of kind of just gives a quick general summation of these last few chapters of the book of Judges, and so that's kind of been Brother Cash's attitude toward this as well as mine, and that is that's just not really enough detailed enough to really get some of the meat that's in these chapters, and I know they're trying to cover it in a certain amount of time with a certain amount of lessons, and since we're not kind of restricted to a time limit, we can kind of stretch it out and find some things that we might otherwise miss if we were not doing so. I know when I've taught for different Bible schools, you've got to cover a certain amount of material in a certain amount of time in a certain number of classes. So you don't get a chance to go into much detail on any particular item unless you deem that more important than some of the other stuff. Because if you do any detail on everything, then of course you won't make it in the time frame. Thank God we don't have a time frame here as we study the Bible together. Let's take a look now at kind of a review of where we've been. We talked about the evilness that took place in Gibeah, and how that the men of the city of Gibeah, which is in the tribe of somebody need to help me. I'm struggling. Benjamin, there you go. In the tribe of Benjamin, the men of Benjamin, and especially of this city of Gibeah, have you know done some serious evil. We thought it was kind of ironic that the man traveling back home decided not to stop in a foreign country because he probably figured that being back in Israel, he'd be safe. And then he winds up getting accosted and attacked there in his own nation. The men of the city wanted to abuse him sexually. They instead, because they couldn't get to him, took his concubine and abused her until she died. And then he takes and cuts her up and sends her all across the nation to let everybody know that the sin that took place in Israel. And it was, and I mentioned early on in that it is quite easy to conclude, and certainly it's obvious that as we read through the text, that sin was in Israel quite prevalently. In fact, we see it mentioned several times that in those days there was no king in Israel, and people were just doing whatever they wanted to do. So we know sin's there. But yet in the closing verses, as Brother Cash mentioned when we was wrapping up last Wednesday night, on the closing verses it said, nothing this bad has happened since we left Egypt. Not in Israel. Now we know the 19th chapter of Genesis where something similar to this happened, uh, but this was so horrible and so repulsive. Even the sinful folks out in the community said this is bad. God folk just don't do this kind of stuff, and oftentimes we can overlook our own shortcomings when we focus on how bad somebody else is. It is often in our walk with Christians we generally, when trying to overlook our own shortcomings, we say, well, I'm not as bad as, or I do better than. And Paul would even say that when we compare ourselves among ourselves and against one another, that's not wise. It's not, we certainly need to be measuring ourselves by the standard of God's law. but yet and still in this environment. And certainly we take a look at our personal walk with God. We cannot justify our shortcomings by anyone's standard. We can't do that. But at the same time, when it comes to a civil environment, a social, a government situation, where you're not just running a church, but you're actually running a nation, there comes a point when you've got to say, okay, we can't go for this. This has got to be dealt with. And there are even times in the church where people's lives are struggling and their lives are in shambles sometimes. But sometimes things get so bad that it becomes public knowledge, and the church leadership's got to say, we can't put up with that. We've got to deal with that. And this is one of those circumstances. This sin had become so ugly. And with him cutting up his concubine and sending her across the nation, now it became public knowledge. Everybody now knew. I'm sure folks in every city all over Israel was talking about the horrible thing that went on in Gibeah. And so it's got to be dealt with. And so we move now on into chapter 20, where we find Israel begins to pull it together so that they can deal with the situation that they find themselves in. And again, what we're going to do is what we've been doing is that we're going to break this up. This entire section here runs in our textbook, runs all 48 verses in this one lesson breakdown. So we're going to take and break it up into smaller portions so that we can deal with it. We'll deal with the first 7 verses first. That's in Judges 20, verses 1 through 7. And this is the assembly. First thing they do when they get ready to try to correct the wrong that's been done, after they have observed, man, this is horrible. Nothing like this has ever happened since we left Egypt. I don't know where we're going. You know how it is. These young folk nowadays just gotten worse and worse. You know how we say that. I mean, back when I wish back it was like it back in our day when we were kids. It was so much better then, and of course probably wasn't. But that's the way we look at it. And now I just don't know what has happened to this new generation. And so they first off start with an assembly. They get together all the tribes, and they sit down together and they start talking about verses 1 through 7. Then all the children of Israel went out, and the congregation was gathered together as one man, from Dan even to Beersheba, with the land of Gilead, unto the Lord in Mizpah. And the chief of all the people, even of all the tribes of Israel, presented themselves in the assembly of God, 400,000 footmen that drew sword. Now the children of Benjamin heard that the children of Israel were gone up to Mizpah. Then the children of Israel said, tell us, how was this wickedness? And the Levite, the husband of the woman that was slain, answered and said, I came unto Gibeah, that belongs to Benjamin, I and my concubine, to lodge. And the men of Gibeah rose against me and beset the house round about upon me by night, and thought to have slain me. And my concubine they have forced, that she is dead. And I took my concubine and cut her in pieces and sent her throughout all the country of the inheritance of Israel, for they have committed lewdness and folly in Israel. And behold, you are all children of Israel. Give here your advice and counsel. So here we are. We're in an assembly where, and you can see when you start dealing with a problem, and this should be the way you go about it, and not only in government or in the church affairs, but in your own personal life. When you start dealing with a problem, you first need to get the whole story, shouldn't you? Should get the whole story. I don't know, how often do we hear somebody tell us something and then we just assume that is correct, and we run with it? And sometimes you find that somebody will, we all do that. If I'm telling you something that took place, I'm telling you from my perspective. Now, if I'm in opposition to whatever took place, then I'm going to tell you all the negative parts of it. If I'm for what took place, I'm going to tell you all the positive parts of it. And that's just the way we as humans work. And so it's always better, it's always sound reasoning to get people from diverse thought processes, diverse backgrounds, different tribes, and get them together and say, okay, this is the facts as we know them. What do you think? I've said this before, and I'll say it again. If you've got people surrounded you that nod when you nod and move when you move, they might as well be your shadow. If you don't have people in your inner circle that can tell you, I don't think that's right, I disagree with that. If you will not allow people in your life that will tell you, you don't need to do that, stop that, let's do this here instead. That's not to say that you're always going to agree with them. Most of the time you won't. But it's healthy to have people in your circle to which you disagree with so that they can give you some balance. Because if you don't, you will always go in whatever direction you think is right. Is oftentimes people have been tempered or changed or adjusted their strategy simply because a close friend said, hey, I wouldn't do that if I was you. And so here they are. They've come together. They've talked about it. And the interesting thing is, and you'll see this mentioned several times throughout the course of this chapter, and they came together as one man. They came together. Notice how it started off in the very first verse, verse 1. Then all the children of Israel went out, and the congregation was gathered together as one man. We'll see this mentioned again as they start to make that decision. It's just talking about the unity that's necessary. Anytime you're going to undertake a major operation, a major project of something, you've got to come together as one. Unity has got to be there. Because if not, I mean, you can have all the greatest ideas in the world. I don't know how many times I've been in organizations and been in groups of people where somebody throws out a great idea. Oh, this is wonderful. But it never gets implemented. Or if it does get implemented, we run with it a couple days and then nothing happens. It just disappears along the sidelines. And so here, they were dead set and determined that they were going to do something about this great wickedness and folly and lewdness, as the Levite here is sharing with us, and that they come together as one person. Notice also, they have in this 400,000 people, warriors, and that's not talking about the women and children. That's talking about men of war. And I'm like, you would think that with that kind of numbers, they could just about accomplish anything, couldn't they? 400,000. Now we're looking at 11 tribes of the nation of Israel, and they all brought together. They counted up how many they had, and that's the backing that they have. So at this point, they're thinking we can probably get something done. It's good when you got a lot of numbers, isn't it? It's hard to get something done when you ain't got but a handful of folks, isn't it? A lot of times. Go ahead. Mm-hmm. Okay. What lacks between the large group that you're talking about and the small group? What's the lacking factor? The drive and the unity. It's harder to keep a group of 400,000 unified as one person. It's a lot easier if you only got 5 or 10 to keep them motivated and unified. And so a lot of times you're right. You get a bunch of people together, and you'll wind up finding that you got more watchers than workers. You got more leaners than lifters. And so certainly, that's it's good to have a solid core of people who are willing to work. But it's also good to have a large following. If if you can get everybody on task and get them moving in the right direction. And that's one of the interesting things in our religious society today. Everybody wants to have what? The mega church. Everybody wants the mega church, don't they? We look over there and we see this church, everything just exploded, and now they got 20 campuses, and they taking up $150,000 a Sunday. We thought, oh man, what could you do for the Lord if you probably nothing, because by that time you got off track and you're doing something else. But the fact of it is that it's important that whatever number you have, that they are united, that they're all coming together and supporting the one objective. And then they listen to the testimony of the Levite. He tells, okay, they say, okay, tell us what happened. And he sits down and he tells them, this is what happened. And he goes and he summarizes the events. He doesn't tell all the details as we have in our record, but he said, okay. And then the question comes up at the end of the statement in verse 7. He said, now you're all children of Israel. Tell us what you think. What do you think? What do we need to do? So here, once they have heard the story and once they sat down and started discussing it, verses 8 through 11 talks about the united decision that they make. Because ultimately, I don't care how much you discuss something, how much you think about it, how much you farm it out to committees to study it. At some point, somewhere, somehow, somebody's got to do what? Make a decision. I'm talking about we analyze stuff, and people talk about the paralysis of analysis. Sometimes we think about it so long we don't get nothing done. If you want to if you want to watch our government in action, wait until they take on an issue, and then okay, let's set up a committee to study it. Well, that means that's pushed it off for the next 2 or 3 years probably, because now we're studying it. And so here they are, they're making a decision, and we're starting at verse 8 and going through verse 11. And all the people arose as one man. There we hear it again, don't we? They arose as one man, saying, we will not any of us go to his tent, neither will we any of us turn into his house. But now this shall be the thing which we will do to Gibeah. We will go up by lot against it. We will take 10 men of 100 throughout all the tribes of Israel, and 100 of 1,000, and 1,000 of 10,000 to fetch victuals for the people, that they may do when they come to Gibeah of Benjamin, according to all the folly that they have wrought in Israel. And so all the men of Israel were gathered against the city, knit together as one man. If you're going to make anything work, there has got to be a stacking or a breakdown of the chain of command and the assignment of jobs. If everybody just runs out and says, okay, let's go to work, and nobody's there to say, okay, let's do this, let's do this. I tell you what, you guys do this right here. And nobody's going to get anything done. You're going to run over each other. Pretty soon you start fighting. I was going to do that first. No, I'm going to do that. No, you can't do that. Even when Moses was trying to lead the children of Israel, and he would sit there, he'd take a day out of the year, and he would sit there and talk to the people about all the different disgruntled problems they had. And his father Jethro come by one day and saw him doing that. What did he tell him? You remember what he told him? Hey, man, you can't do that. Man, you kill yourself. He said, man, these folks will wear you out. I know. He kicked my cat yesterday, and I'm mad. What you gonna do about it, Moses? What did Jethro tell him to do? He said, set this thing up. Same way they're doing it here. He said, you set up captains of hundreds and captains of thousands. And in other words, stagger the rank of command. Make this person over this small group. And then you get all 10 of these groups, and you make one person over all 10 of those. And that way, whenever some problem comes up, let them deal with that. And if it gets too much for the guy that's captain over 100, let him then refer it back to his superior, the captain of 1,000. And then if that gets too much, it works this way up the chain of command. He said, then Moses, all you do is deal with the hard stuff. He said that decreases your problems real quick. And so here he's saying, now, if we're going to go to war, if we're going to fight this fight, we're going to have some supply chains, and we're going to have some support groups. Everybody can't go out there and fight. Because what happens after you go out and do a good hard day's work? What happens? You get hungry, don't you? Yeah, you get hungry. And then you come back and you think, well, what else going to eat? So they said, well, let's get some folks We'll select so many people out of each of our tribes, and they will provide the support. And then the rest of us will go out to war. And so they've got it together. And again, in verse 11, you see that statement again, don't you? So all the men of Israel were gathered together against the city. And then he uses the word knit together as one man, knit together. You ever watch somebody knit? By the time you twist those strings all up in, you twist them all up in each other, it holds the whole fabric together. What happens when you clip one of the strings? It just unravels, doesn't it? It unravels. And that sometimes is what happens to great works. That's what happens to great works. It just unravels. We mentioned it in our business meeting this morning back during the crusade. We were doing all the door knocking. I don't know if those of you who were active in the church and the community at that time, going out and one of the first questions that came up, and it's kind of served as probably one of the stumbling blocks of the movement. It was that, well, if we go over to y'all church and we door knock in y'all community and we baptize, well, who gonna get the member? And then all of a sudden you start seeing it unravel. If we can't stay knit together as one person, my philosophy has always been, I don't really care who gets the credit as long as we get something done. It doesn't matter. And the saying goes that it's amazing how much a person could do and how much they can accomplish if they don't care who gets the credit. And so that's what they're trying to say here. We're going to work this thing together. There are going to be some people who are going to have to work in support. There are going to be some people who have to fight on the battlefield. And those who are doing their job have to do their job if we're going to make the process work. And that's the way it is in the church today. We have the different organizations, we have the different groups, we have the different committees that are set up, and we've got benevolence, we've got education, we've got evangelism, and so if we don't work in those groups, then we can't get the church to move forward. The church has got to move forward as we each play our role, each teach our classes, each encourage the one beside us or the one we have the influence over, and that the church can move forward. All right, so in this section, we move on to our next section. After they make the decision that we are going to do this, we are going to correct this in the best way in which we can. Then we get to verses 12 through 17. And they do something that I think is very appropriate. It is easy to experience a violation against you or someone you love, and then in rashness decide, I'll just get them all. And if you remember the old story of the Hatfields and the McCoys, the family feud, in which for generations, those two families, and I believe it was in the hills of Kentucky or Tennessee, one of the two, that they hated each other for generations. You're talking about hated with a passion. Until they came up to the point where the generation that was currently hating and threatening each other, they didn't even know why the fight was going on. It had been going on just that long that the people who actually fell out, they weren't even there anymore. And yet their families were still fighting. And so what they do instead on this occasion, they say, well, let's just deal. Now, we don't want to attack the whole tribe of Benjamin. Let's just deal with the people who did the evil. It'd been easy to say, well, we'll just go beat up on the whole tribe. Guilty by association. But no, let's deal with the people who did the evil. Let's look at verses 12 through 17. And the tribes of Israel sent men through all the tribe of Benjamin, saying, what wickedness is this that is done among you? Now, therefore, deliver us the men, the children of Belial, which are in Gibeah, that we may put them to death, and put away evil from Israel. But the children of Benjamin would not hearken to the voice of their brethren, the children of Israel. But the children of Benjamin gathered themselves together out of the cities unto Gibeah to go to battle against the children of Israel. And the children of Benjamin were numbered at that time out of the cities 26,000 men that drew sword, besides the inhabitants of Gibeah, which were numbered 700 chosen men. And among all this people, there were 700 chosen men left handed. Every one could sling stones at a hair's breadth and not miss. And the men of Israel, besides Benjamin, were numbered 400,000 men that drew sword. All of these were men of war. So when we first just glance at this story, we think, well, that's kind of lopsided. You got 26,700 folks that they're going to go to war with 400,000 people. This ought to be a massacre. Real quick, we should have this over in a day or two. That's what you would think. And you got to ask yourself the question, what kind of counsel was the men of Benjamin getting? You got 26,700 guys, and you're going to go to war with 400,000? That don't make sense. You must have to have a secret weapon or something. They must have thought they had a machine gun or an atomic bomb or something that they were going to use to defend themselves with. Because just in sheer numbers, you would think they would say, "Oh, we'll turn these guys over, man. Ain't no problem. Y'all don't come over here and kill us all. We'll just give you the guys." But no, they're standing fast, and they're going to fight the whole nation. We'll just fight all y'all. Kind of like the little bitty kid on the playground. And he's just gonna fight the big dude, you know. And they call it the Napoleon syndrome. I don't know how many times I done had little kids in my class and little kids on my bus. They ain't big as a quarter, but they got the mouth that's so loud, and they want to fight everybody. And here you got a situation which logically just really doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But yet this is what Benjamin did. Rather than us settle the thing, let's get this thing corrected. They want to go to war against the whole nation in order to, I guess, defend their honor. But you know the part I like about this section here? So they had 700 left-handed men. Now, why in the world would the Bible mention that there were 700 of them that were left-handed? Unless left-handed is so talented, is so wonderful, and such. And y'all might say, well, yeah, you're just saying that because you're left-handed. And I was saying, well, yeah, you're right. And it's the interesting thing is the way the Bible describes how talented these guys were. What does it mean could sling stones at a hair's breadth and not miss? What does that mean? How wide is a string of hair? That's tiny, isn't it? I'm talking about that you could take a string of somebody's hair and hold it up, and they could take a stone and sling it and hit that hair. What are you talking about? You come a lot of practice. That's some skilled guys. You remember years ago, a gentleman I was talking to, he said he'd been in the Air Force, and I asked him how well could he shoot. He said I can shoot the eyes of a rat out at 50 yards. So maybe this was what made them so confident. Maybe they said we just that good. We just that good. We can take on the whole country and whoop them down. But here it's pointing out that we had 700 of the 26,700 men. 700 of them were left-handed sling artists. Could shoot stones, and the Bible doesn't say how far away they were, but I'm sure they wasn't just standing right on the stone. I'm not sure I could hit a hair if I was standing right over top of it with a slingshot. But it means that they were very talented, they were very trained, they were very, very, very good at their shot. They were deadly, and they were willing to take on Israel. They were sharpshooters. Yeah, they were snipers. They were snipers. I'm always amazed in watching those movies about snipers, man. I'm amazed. I'm not that good at a shot. I've gone to the range a few times and I fire my gun a little bit. I probably could hit something, if it wasn't too far away. But when you're carrying a weapon, you don't have to worry about shooting 50 yards away, because if somebody's 50 yards away, they're not in very much danger in your life or anything. You better not be shooting at them then. Normally, if you're in close physical range where your life is threatened, you ain't got but about 5, 10 feet. What you gonna shoot? I think I could hit somebody as big as a person if I needed to. Hopefully, I won't ever have to need to, and I thank God for him keeping me safe thus far. But to imagine being able to, to be a sharpshooter and watching some of those movies and seeing snipers, man, they'd be a mile away and they can tag somebody, and they're sitting there adjusting their scopes based on what direction the wind is blowing in and all of that stuff, and it's just amazing. Skill is certainly in battle is amazing, uh, and that's one of the reasons why we have so much volatility in our streets, is that the folks that are out shooting each other in the streets, they can't shoot worth anything. That's why you hit folks in their house next door and down the block, or some baby that's sleeping in bed. You can't hit the person you're shooting at. Mm. And so here we are. We find that they're ready to go to war. They are taking stock of the people that they have. They are confident in the fact that they can handle themselves because they have sharpshooters on hand. And so what takes us in is to the first battle. And you would think, as I've said before, we got 400,000 on this side, we got 26,700 on that side. It should be a relatively quick fight. Go in there, mop up the place, wreak havoc on the citizens of Benjamin, punish them for not only being part of this evil activity, but supporting the ones who were a part of it. And of course, that tells you one thing is what God looks at. So what was mentioned in Romans chapter 1, where he said, not only those who do the same, but those who have pleasure in those who do them. Supporting someone in their wickedness is just as bad as if you were a party to the actual deed that took place. So we're looking at verses 18 through 25, and this is probably as far as we get. We've got about another 4 minutes on our time clock. And the children of Israel arose and went up to the house of God and asked counsel of God and said, which of us shall go up first to battle against the children of Benjamin? And the Lord said, Judah shall go up first. And the children of Israel rose up in the morning and encamped against Gibeah. And the men of Israel went out to battle against Benjamin, and the men of Israel put themselves in array to fight against them at Gibeah. And the children of Benjamin came forth out of Gibeah and destroyed down the ground of the Israelites that day, 22,000 men. And the people of the men of Israel encouraged themselves, set their battle again in array in the place where they had put themselves in array the first day. And the children of Israel went up and wept before the Lord until even, and asked counsel of the Lord, saying, shall I go up again to battle against the children of Benjamin, my brother? And the Lord said, go up against him. And the children of Israel came near against the children of Benjamin the second day. And Benjamin went forth against them out of Gibeah the second day and destroyed them down to the ground, the children of Israel, again 18,000 men. All of these drew sword. That's a lot of folks. That's a lot of folks dying. And you have to scratch your head at this point. You got to give them credit for the fact that before they went, once they made up in their mind what they wanted to do, and that may be the reason that maybe we're dealing with this, they made up their mind first, then they went and talked to God. And how many times we do that? How many times we do that? I want the Lord to be pleased with my life. Not I want my life to be pleasing to the Lord. Is there a difference? Many times in our mind, we already have made up in our mind what we're going to do. And then we go to God in prayer and say, Lord, bless me and help me accomplish this. Rather than go to him first saying, Lord, what do you want me to do? And then weigh out the circumstance and make up our mind. But you got to give them credit because they did consult God. They went and talked to God about what they were planning to do. God, is this okay with you? What did God tell them? Go ahead. And you got to scratch your head on this. You say, what's going on? Why are we losing? If God is telling us to do this, why are we losing? Let me help you out. That was a question. I don't know if y'all noticed that or not. That was a question. Somebody help me. Why, Sister Prince, why were they losing? He says Prince had to pray on that one. Somebody help me. Kiva, what do you think? If God told him to do it, why did he lose it? Because he wasn't ready for him to win, was he? Bible doesn't say, does it? You might probably conclude some things. Maybe God is showing them what sin in their life looks like. Because the Bible, let's not forget that even though this was a most hideous situation, the Bible says that in those days, there was no king in Israel. And everybody did what was right in their own. The whole nation was doing it. Everybody was living in sin. Not just the Benjamins. And just because they were worse than the rest of the folks didn't mean that God was pleased with any of them. There are times that I think God constructs a process by which helps us to realize just how ugly sin is. Go back and look at all the sacrifices of the time of Israel and how God had Moses and Aaron to create all these beautiful white outfits and with all the embroidery and the beadwork and the gold twisted in and out and the blue and the scarlet and how that they would come in and the priests would come in every day and they would wash their bodies and then they'd put on these royal robes, these holy garments, and they would go in and start doing sacrifices. And they would probably, in the process of a day, do hundreds of sacrifices. How many of you think when they got through, that their garments were still clean and white? Ain't possible. Now you cutting the throats of animals and that blood squirting everywhere, and then you catching it and pouring it here and doing that and cutting up things. I bet you those white, beautiful garments were nasty as they could be. As a clear indication of what sin does to your life. And I think perhaps this is what God was trying to show them. You might be not as quite wicked as they are, but you're wicked. And you might want to make sure that you're on my side before you engage them in their sin. Wasn't that what Jesus said? You want to get the dust out of somebody else's eye? You might want to make sure you don't have something sticking out of yours. That's what God was trying to tell them, I believe. All right, we are out of time. We'll pick up on that section on Wednesday evening. Any questions or comments as we close? Thank you so much for your time and attention.
We'll stand. We'll do a selection of 118, Shelter in the Time of Storm. Selection 118. The Lord's our rock, in him we hide, a shelter in the time of storm. Secure whatever ill betide, a shelter in the time of storm. Oh, Jesus is a rock in a weary land. I said a weary land. I said a weary land. Oh, Jesus is a rock in a weary land. He's a shelter in the time of